And then I took a look at his fingertips, and it looked like they were gone. And then I just tackled him and put him on the ground, fed him a few shots. He starts crying. So when I went over to Italy the first time, and I got introduced to this guy that was a Calabrian that basically headed a family out in Milan. And Medellin is where I go on a Pablo Escobar tour, and I meet with his sister, and I basically get the whole Escobar experience, which was phenomenal.
Germano Tomassetti, how are we?
Doing well, doing well. Happy to finally be here. It's taken a while, but
Yeah,
we're here.
yeah, lovely, great
Yeah,
stuff, and really good to have you. Should we start with a bit of your story is mind blowing, but should we start all the way at the beginning from your sort of cradle to school years?
yeah, definitely. So I was born in Winnipeg, Canada. I'm 35 years old. I was born November 3rd, 1988. I've spent my entire life here up until the last, few years traveling and stuff. I grew up in a place called Transfona, which is um, basically like a city within the city. It's kind of small town mentality. I grew up in a household where it was me, two sisters, my mom and dad. And then eventually, around 10 years old, 11 years old, my parents divorced. It was a toxic relationship. My dad was in and out of prison. He was a bit abusive, and he later got on to drugs and just high armed robberies and stuff like that. So at one point, it was just basically me and three women. So it was my two older sisters and my mom. My childhood was somewhat normal. I mean, it was a bit chaotic, but it wasn't anything out of the norm, really. Like I said, I was growing up with those two sisters, and it was an emotional household. Being the only male, but I actually credit a lot of who I am and my character as a person growing up with three females. Um, School was never good for me. I think I was diagnosed with like ADHD from an early age. I just couldn't concentrate well. They had me on medication. Um, in the earlier years as well, I dealt with a lot of bullying. My sister was quite popular, but she was kind of hated as well by some of the other people. So like their younger brothers or their younger sisters or whatever would pick on me because of her relationship in school. And yeah, I was a strange kid. I've always been a different guy. I haven't even nowadays I think that like I do too much good to be bad, and I do too much bad to be good, so I'm like kind of in limbo. And I think that started at an early age, you know what I mean? Um, but yeah, relatively normal, nothing really outstanding. I mean, I dealt with some group homes when I was younger because of my temperament. And that I think I just, I grew up subconsciously upset with my mother for my dad not being there and being bullied, and all these other things just kind of made me like this really angry, kind of out of control kid. But again, like I've repeated, like relatively normal though, from what I hear from a lot of people, right? Like it wasn't anything special. It wasn't anything great. Uh, I don't have a lot of great memories of when I was young. Um, I think that also, again, subconsciously through whatever you want to call it, trauma response or whatever it is, my memory is not good, especially of my early days. I think that I just kind of blocked everything out because of my experiences. And, and that can be a good thing and it can be a bad thing because like even through writing the book, which was a very therapeutic process, it was really hard to access some of those earlier days and those memories because I forgot so much of it, including the positive ones. It's not subjective. It's not like you can just remember the good ones and not remember the bad ones. It was just a total block, right? So yeah,
Did writing the book sort of open up some traumas for you?
100%. Yeah. I talked about being abused by a teacher in the book. That's not something that I ever talked about with anyone, including my sisters. So, I got a phone call a couple of months ago from my sister that told me like, what is this about? Like she had no idea. And she cried and she told me she was sorry and that it kind of made sense of why I grew up. There's a lot of things that happened throughout my, childhood and teenage years that kind of made sense to um, my opinion or my reaction towards authority figures. From an early age, I saw that systems and structures were flawed and cracked, and where we're supposed to feel safe and where we're supposed to feel like we can progress, we can't because we're in something that's fundamentally flawed, right?
Yeah, it sounds very traumatic.
It was, yeah.
Your father was sent to prison for robbing a McDonald's, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was. So later on, his first robbery he did was called Safeway out here, and it's basically like a grocery chain. Sorry. I think he was about 17 or 18 years old. He got caught when he was like 19. After he did that one, that was his bigger one when he was young. He got away with about 60 grand, which at his age was a lot of money. And then I guess because he saw that he was successful with it and the crew that he had was, somewhat successful with it, they did a couple of other armed robberies. And one of them ended up being a McDonald's later on. And then I believe about 2 years after all of them, the police here in Winnipeg found him in Montreal. He had kind of like, I guess, went on the lam or whatever and saw some of our family in Montreal. And they showed up and they arrested him out there. And then I think he did about 6 years for these armed robberies.
Wow.
Yeah.
Did you get involved in any crime when you were younger?
Yeah, like starting from like grade 7, grade 8, I was around, what you would call the bad kids. Like I was around the kids that were skipping school or smoking weed, going to parties, some gang members and stuff. I would partake in certain stuff, you know what I mean? But nothing really big. But I was always right next to it. I was always with guys that were doing bad things. Um, I guess it progressed a little bit in my teenage years. Like when I turned like 16, 17, I started hanging out more with like drug dealers, like pretty big time drug dealers, that were either a couple of years older than me or my age. And I sold a little bit too when I was younger. Like I sold, some ecstasy, I sold cocaine, I sold weed, but never heavy amounts and not for a long period of time. I just didn't like it. I didn't like the atmosphere of drug dealing. I didn't like when I was older. It became even more aware of like the consequences to it, which are just like, you can't trust people out here. There's a lot of street violence that goes along with selling drugs, and yeah, just the time that you would go away for. Again, I figured this out a little bit older, but the time that you would get for like an ounce of crack compared to stealing $1 million through white collar crime, it's ridiculous. Like some of those guys don't even go to jail that are doing these white collar crimes, especially if it's their first offense. And then you got someone that's caught with a couple $1,000s worth of drugs, and they're going to jail for 5 or 6 years. So I was smart enough to realize that that's not the way to go. And I also, for my own personal reasons, didn't like it when I was younger because I saw what it did to families. I saw what it ended up doing to my father. And I basically just stayed away from it, you know what I mean, as much as I could.
You went through some dark times, didn't you, in your childhood? And it led you to almost taking your own life?
Yeah, that came a little bit later on. Probably like basically right before I got into crime, there was a time that I was homeless and yeah, there was one night that I went to a hotel room, and like I had it all planned out how I was gonna do it, and I had written a letter and everything, and then I had like this kind of weird, I don't know how to explain it, but God moment, spiritual moment, whatever you want to call it, where I just kind of talked out loud to my mom who had passed away, and I just said, like if there's any sign, because I hadn't felt her presence in a while, and I did after she had first passed away. And I was just looking for some kind of sign, and then all of a sudden I just became completely exhausted and fell asleep. So I took that as a sign. And I know that sounds a little strange to people listening, but it's I can't explain it. Like before I started talking, and I don't mean like talking for hours. I mean I just said a few words, and as soon as I said it, all of a sudden, it was almost like I had ran a marathon and then just fell asleep. And when I woke up, I I had a completely different energy about me. You know what I mean?
Yeah, everyone's got their own story with things like that, but it's obviously you must have been in depths of despair to consider doing something like that.
Yeah, I think I was just exhausted from life in general. And then, oddly enough, that's what like eventually leads me into real crime is having a spiritual awakening and just realizing that like life is precious, and like I didn't want to spend any more time being broke and miserable. And yeah, it's weird how the universe opens up when you change your mind.
Yeah, totally. Do you know, I had a kind of, it wasn't a similar experience, but it was in some ways. I was
Mhm.
driving my car down what we would call the motorway. I think you guys call it the freeway.
Yeah.
And a car pulled out in front of me on the fast lane and put their brakes on. And I flipped the car, my car flipped. So I
Wow.
ended up on its roof. And for that split, and it went all in slow motion.
Of
For that
course.
split second, when I knew what was going to happen to the flipped, I actually prayed. And it wasn't like really a conscious, I didn't have time to consciously like pray. But
Yeah.
it just like, please God, don't let me die. Do you know
Right.
what I mean? And it was like, and well, obviously, fortunately, I didn't. And I got away relatively unscathed.
Yeah.
But it was weird how my mind kind of went like that when it's staring death in the face.
Yeah.
Then
Sorry to interrupt, but it's funny that
no,
you mentioned that, because I didn't grow up very religious, and I didn't
me
really,
neither.
like, I always believed in a higher power or whatever, but like I didn't follow religion. So yeah, it's interesting how in that moment, like that moment that you feel like
Yeah,
it's over, you're like, please help me.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And it must have been one split second. And I didn't grow up in a religious family, and I wasn't religious at the time, so
Yeah.
it made it even more kind of like weird when I looked back at it and sort of said, "Well, I actually prayed in that moment, and I'm not a prayer. I wasn't a prayer." You
That's
know,
wild. Yeah.
it is crazy.
Yeah.
So you spend about your book, which is brilliant, by the way, for
Thank
Winnipeg
you.
story.
Thank you.
No, it's really good. I've left a review on your book
I saw that. I
on Amazon.
appreciate it and the support. I'm glad that you even read it. You know what I mean? Obviously, you're taking what you're doing with the podcast seriously. You want to get your research done right, but I appreciate the support. It was great for you to leave a comment and yeah, just reach out to me the way that you did.
Yeah, no, that was brilliant. No problem.
Yeah.
For about 30% of the book is on your sort of childhood, if you like, before crime, pre-crime.
Yeah.
So I'm not gonna sort of delve in too much
Yeah. I
to it.
know.
So if anyone wants to read it, obviously I'll put a link in the description box
Yeah. Perfect.
to the Amazon page, and yeah, and then they can sort of read the 30% of the book, the beginning, which really details your relationships with your family and how you're feeling. It's very much a kind of philosophical first 30%. It's kind of philosophical, and you're answering questions, aren't you, about why you're feeling like that and things that have happened and people you've upset, and like you mentioned your sister,
Yeah.
etc., which we'll hopefully touch on later. But yeah, etc., etc. So if we go on to the kind of run up to meeting the mafia guy from Quebec, wasn't he?
Yep. Yep.
What was your story up to meeting him? Because that's a fascinating story in itself.
Yeah, you know what? There's a lot of moments in the book, in my story, in the podcast, whatever, which are really like movie moments. They're very visual, right? And I think that is definitely one of them that's been highlighted. In fact, meeting this person that you're talking about, that I'll get into, that was a huge highlight for the documentary that I just finished filming. That is a huge visual piece, because not only is it an introduction to really I had little experience with crime earlier, but I never really dived into it until then. So, but on top of that, it's just, yeah, this visually kind of almost like a cinematic experience. So basically what happened was, like I said, I was homeless for a period of time, in, yeah, the 2010s. I don't know exactly when it was. I think 2014 or 15. And through being homeless for about a period of 5 months or so, I had a couple of months where I befriended a Sicilian crime figure. I didn't know that when I met him. When I first met him, he was just an older guy that was, spoke basically broken English, and someone that I was friendly with, and that was it. There was I thought the guy was a little bit suspicious. Some of the stories he would tell me, and why he was in the shelter, and why he was even in Winnipeg. Some of that kind of stuff didn't add up, but I had no idea that he was like anybody special, that he was an organized crime figure or something like that. I thought maybe he was a criminal, but I didn't think it was like, somebody that was higher up or whatever. So yeah, we just become friends by fluke. He sees me wearing an Italian hoodie one day. He asks me if I'm Italian, starts speaking to me in Sicilian. I have no idea what he's talking about, but we basically, break down the English and the Italian enough to have a few words, and yeah, it stays like that for a while. And we would just bump into each other. He came to the shelter that I was at. Sometimes he would just come for coffee or a meal or whatever it was, and we would just talk about everything from from soccer or football. Um, and he would talk to me about Sicily, about his life over there. He would almost in a way that he's like reminiscing about like vineyards and olive trees and all this stuff. And I loved listening to that. It made me feel like I was in touch with my roots, just being around him. So another thing about this guy though was he wasn't mentally all there, and I don't think that he was physically well either. He had a lot of problems. I don't know all of them, but the guy had dentures. Um, he had a really bad cough. I don't know if it was from smoking or whatever else. He was just like he was just not a healthy guy. And like listening to his story, sometimes he'd trail off, and I could realize that he wasn't all there mentally as well. And I just tried my best to always check up on him and always take care of him and grab him coffee if he needed or food. Or there's a part that I've talked about in other podcasts where sometimes his dentures would fall out because they were clearly old, and I would rinse them for him and help him put them back in and all this stuff. And then one day we're sitting there, and this is the part of the story that a lot of people find unbelievable. And it's like, I can't confirm that this is what it is. It's just what it appeared to be. So I remember that one day we were eating, his dentures fall out. And then I took a look at his fingertips, and it looked like they were gone. And it's so hard to explain that to people, but they just didn't look normal. They looked like bone, like the skin had been like, uh, soldered down or something like that. I don't even know how to explain it, but I came to the idea that they were burned off with acid. You know what I mean? And that's something that I heard about later on as well, happening to people that were on the lam. So people that were on the run would do like crazy things, from plastic surgery to dentures, and even getting their fingerprints like kind of burned off so that they were not identifiable. You know what I mean? So yeah, we go through this day where, and this is like a month or a month and a half in to me talking with him, right? We only had a couple months together, and this whole time I hadn't realized it until that day. I guess I didn't pay attention. Like I knew about the dentures and everything, but then when I saw the fingertips, I'm like, wow, maybe this guy is really somebody else, because I it could have been wrong. You know what I mean? I could have been wrong about it. I never got a confirmation. I did find out later that obviously he was, an organized crime figure. He was a capo within one of the families in Quebec. I don't even know if he was in Montreal, but I know he's in Quebec. Could have been from Laval. Could have been from one of the other more kind of gangster areas. But um, yeah, so basically what happens is we hang out. This moment happens with the fingertips, and then one day while I'm still staying at the shelter, I run into him on the street, and he tells me that he's going back home, that everything's calmed down, and that he just basically said thank you for like helping him out and taking care of him, and that he'll never forget it. And he just kept saying to me like, you're a bravo ragazzo, you're a good boy, you're a good boy. um I want to do something nice for you, so I have an opportunity in the future. One of my friends is going to reach out to you, and if you want to make some money and get out of this shelter, take it. But like, don't. He basically said without saying, like, don't take it lightly. You know what I mean? So, yeah, he leaves. We leave on good terms. We exchange information, and then about a month or two later, I get out of the shelter, I get my own apartment with a friend, and then towards my birthday, which is November, I get contacted by this guy from Quebec, and he lets me know that he's like friends with the old man, and that he's going to be in Winnipeg, and that his flight was arriving at a certain time, a couple hours later, and to meet me at this place. So I go and meet the guy, and he repeats to me everything that the old man says, and basically says, you did a good job, you took care of him. He really liked you on a personal level. What we're about to offer you is not something that we offer to normal people, civilians like yourself. You know what I mean? Kept using the word civilian, and he said, but the old man seems to think that you're trustworthy, that you got a good heart, and that you're capable. And he basically went on to hand me a couple envelopes, and in one of the envelopes was a bunch of cash. It was around $4,000. I always made a joke that I think that what was probably originally in the envelope was five, and the guy took like $1,000 for himself or something, which is typical. But yeah, he said, here's an envelope. This is like a gift, like a birthday gift, and like a thank you for everything that you did for the old man. We appreciate it. And then he gave me this other envelope. He told me to take a look at it. His number was at the bottom, or a number I could reach him at, and to contact him if I was interested. So I leave. I walk a couple blocks, call a taxi, get in the taxi. Obviously, I look in the envelope. I see this money. I'm like, oh my God. Because at the time, I got like $4,000. I just left being homeless 2 months before. I'm making like $1,500 a month at the job that I was working at. So $4,000 was like, I felt like I was rich. And then I look in the envelope, and yeah, it was just a list of names, numbers, addresses, and money amounts. So I kind of had an idea what it was, but I called him a couple of days later once I'd figured out um, whether I was going to go ahead with this. And, I said, is this what I think it is? He said, yes. He's like, can you handle that? I was like, no problem. I didn't ask him how much I was going to make. I didn't ask him anything like that. But it was collections. It was people that had debts. And those debts were everything from cocaine debts, like, whether they had, spotted, an ounce or whatever it was, or could have been gambling debts. It was everything. Some people just took loans because they couldn't get it from the bank, so they go to these guys, So that's how I started really my path into real crime and organized crime.
What made you think it was the mafia?
Well, first, so they were Italian, first of all, and they're from Quebec. And even from a young age, I understood that there's a lot of organized crime figures in Quebec, especially Italian organized crime figures. So when you use the word mafia, like, I'll never correct you, right? But I don't use that word. You know what I mean? When I was younger, I did. And then once I started hanging out with some guys, I realized how much they don't like it, because the mafia really is more of an American term. You know what I mean? Like in American pop culture. So a lot of these organized crime groups, they go by certain names, right? So there's the Camorra, Ndrangheta, La Cosa Nostra. There's other groups like in other parts of the world and stuff like that. But nobody actually uses the word mafia. And especially here in Canada, a lot of the guys will never say that word, even the guys that are in it or the guys that are outside of it. So I'll never correct you on saying it, because that's what everybody says, especially in the true crime podcast world. But we never use that word. You know what I mean?
Yeah, the Canadian press use it though, right?
Well, of course. Yeah, it's like all press uses it, because it's like in big capital letters, mafia. It grabs people's attention. It brings them in.
Because I went to Canada last year, early last year, and while I was over there, I was staggered because I didn't know Canada had a Italian organised crime group, shall we say. And in the place I was staying in Ontario, there was something on the news about a murder in, I think it was Hamilton, Ontario.
Okay,
and they knew, obviously, a mafia hit or a mob hit or whatever. So I'm like, wow, this is like, on my doorstep where I was staying almost. So it's fascinating to me that it's so prominent. And it's, from what I've heard and read, it's more kind of traditional than the American mob, where
100%.
they're
Yeah.
old school values and things like that, which the American
100%.
mob
Yeah. And
not
even
have.
the feuds are old school. So like I said this on the last podcast I did, like there's a a famous quote where it's like Italians forgive but they don't forget. So like I heard stuff, even the whole I'm just talking about what I know from folklore, right? So everything that I'm about to say is not facts. I can't say that it's facts. Some of it can be seen as factual in news articles or whatever else, but what I'm told is the whole Quebec war started between the Calabrians and the Sicilians a long time ago. So a lot of people know that they call it the sixth family in Quebec. That was basically the Rizzuto family. Everybody knows that in the beginning it was like a branch of the Bananos in the U.S. And what a lot of people don't realize is that at the time in that family in Quebec, there were two guys that were really in power. So one was Calabrian, and then one was Rizzuto Senior, right? So what ends up happening, and again, this is folklore, but this is what I'm told and what I've read, is that eventually people don't realize that within these criminal organizations, the Italian criminal organizations, there is sometimes a little bit of a competitive or ego side between different factions. So if you're Calabrian, if you're Napolitan, if you're Sicilian, if you're a Milanese, you're from Milan or whatever, there's always a bit of a rift. There's always a bit of a divide. And the Bananos were predominantly like they were Sicilian mostly, right? So they wanted a Sicilian in power in Quebec. So what ends up happening, what I'm told, is that the Rizzuto family clips this Calabrian guy who was a legend in the Canadian underworld. He had been around forever. A lot of people don't know this, but some of the Calabrian groups have been there since the 1800s in Canada, like late 1800s. So the whole Prohibition era and stuff like that as well. Like a lot of people think that Hamilton, Ontario, and surrounding areas, this was all built during Prohibition era, right? So basically what I'm told is that when Rizzuto goes into jail later on, and he does, 7 or 8 years over there, the Calabrians, one of the sons of this guy that they clipped 30 years earlier, right? This guy that was a boss, his son had been in hiding in Ontario for like 30 years and no one knew about him. This is folklore. I don't know if this is true, but apparently one of the sons that got, of the guy that got clipped from Rizzuto to take over the family in Quebec goes to Ontario. They hide him and among the Calabrians in Ontario. I'm not sure where, but somewhere there. And then later on, when Rizzuto goes into prison, he gets his payback like 30 years later. So that's a wild part of the story that not a lot of people know. Even if you've seen Bad Blood, which I thought was a great show about the whole organized crime structure in Quebec and Rizzuto and stuff. There obviously it's not all truth. There's a lot of fiction, but a lot of like that structure and stuff was very real. And yeah, they didn't really talk about in the show how it really was this Calabrian family that waited until Rizzuto was weak when he went to jail in the U.S. And then they started clipping. They killed his father, they killed his brother-in-law, I think, and a bunch of members. So like that's sorry for the long story, but that just lets you know how these feuds are really kind of re-sparked 30 years, 40 years later. You know what I mean? Guys will wait 5 years, 10 years, 20 years to get revenge. And that is very old school. That's like back in the old country type of stuff. You know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely. Are they still
Yeah.
feuding now? Do you know?
100%. They always will.
Still
Like
feuding.
there will always, a lot of them work together too. You know what I mean? The hit that you're probably talking about, the two brothers that were very popular in Ontario, Calabrian guys, from what I'm told again, they were with Rizzuto. So once Rizzuto died, a lot of his influence died as well. Not all of it. Obviously, his son is still out there, and that's who's currently, in this huge war that's going on in Quebec. But uh, when he lost that influence, some of his loyalists, including these brothers that were in Ontario, ended up, paying the price for it. So you got to keep in mind there are some Calabrians in Ontario that were very anti-Quebec, anti-Sicilian because they had family members that were killed in those wars and stuff like that. So the minute that, okay, he's dead, these guys are not protected anymore, they started sending people out. And oddly enough, I actually you probably read this in the book, I had an encounter because of one of those hits and the botched hit where a woman unfortunately was killed as well in Ontario. So because of the guy's last name that was involved, which is my last name, I ended up running into the DIA, the anti-mafia in Italy, a couple of years later without even knowing why.
Yeah, that's a great story in the book. Yeah,
Yeah.
I remember it.
Yeah.
So back to your story with the Quebec guy, and you're going kind of debt collecting. I know you don't necessarily. I guess you don't like the word enforcer, do you?
No, I
you
don't. And I wasn't that. That's not to say that that doesn't exist, because it does, on a lower scale. But really, a lot of people have wild imaginations. We really go off of what we saw in the movies, and it's not our fault. But everyone thinks that like every time that you go to make a collection, you're beating someone's kneecaps in with a baseball bat. It's not like that. I had one altercation in a year and a half. But that was it. There was a couple of guys that said no, obviously, but I was always the mediator. I was not the guy that was going into show force. I was the guy that was mediating and trying to get something out of it. If it was ever anything more serious, it usually went to a different group.
So what happened with your altercation?
Oh, it was just some kid that I went to school with, actually. He was a Ukrainian kid. His dad was, kind of mobbed up. He was connected with a lot of Italians. He was connected, obviously, with a lot of Ukrainians, which are pretty big here in Winnipeg. And I just went to make this collection off him. And we were just chatting about shit. And I said, man, like, he's all coked out. Like, man, you got to get your shit together. You owe a lot of money. Like, aside from your debt, man, like, you don't look good here. Like, the place looks like shit. Like, clean yourself up. Your father would be embarrassed, that kind of shit. And then there was this point he asked to make me a drink, and I never say yes. That's one thing. I don't drink much at all, but especially back then, like, if I was going to collect off someone, I'm not going to have drink. I'm not going to smoke weed. I'm not going to do anything like that. I'm going to be, level-headed. So he asked to make me like a drink, and he was already sketchy. So I'm like, yeah, okay, whatever, make me a drink. So I go and look over at the statue. There's like this Buddha statue or something like that, and it just caught my eye. And I was looking at it, I was asking him about it. He's like, oh, yeah, this is a gift from, this was a gift to my father from one of his friends in Russia, in one of the organized crime groups or whatever, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, oh, yeah, and we're talking about this. And then he goes to what I think is handing me the drink. And I go to look, and he hits me with a 2x4 right in the ribs. And I just immediately, like, held on to make sure that, like, I don't know, I thought I got stabbed at one point. It was weird. Even though it was a blunt object, I don't know if I went into shock or something like that, and I wasn't expecting it. So he hits me. I look, I realize I'm not cut, and then I just tackled him and put him on the ground, fed him a few shots. He starts crying, starts asking me why I'm hitting him. I'm like, you hit me with a 2x4, bro. Like, what did you think was going to happen? And he's like, man, he was so coked out. He was so paranoid. He thought I was there to like clip him or something. I'm like, listen, man, it's not that serious. It's not that much money that something like that would happen. And yeah, it was nothing much. You know what I mean? I got hit. It hurt, and he felt it afterwards as well. But it kind of just died out there. And eventually, his dad kicked his ass because his dad found out about all his debts and what he did to me. And his dad just beat the shit out of him, paid off his debt, gave me a little bit extra for my troubles, and that was it.
So his dad was a nice guy.
Yeah, his dad was a gangster, but his dad was a gentleman as well. Like a lot of gangsters that I know in the organized crime groups, they are gentlemen. Like, they're not like what we see. Well, I mean, depending what movie you're watching, but yeah, a lot of them are just like really humble, honest, quiet guys. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what happened to you said there was a few people that refused to pay. Do you know what happened to them?
Yeah, I know a couple of guys got roughed up. I don't personally know. That's not to say that this didn't happen, but I don't personally know anybody that got clipped. But I definitely know some guys got beat up pretty bad. There was a couple of fires as well. You know what I mean? Some arson. If it was business owners or whatever else, but I never had anything to do with any of that. Mine was really more of a personal level. A lot of the guys that I were going to um, were not the business owners. They would send, you know, let's say the mob guys for that, right? Just the guys, in suits or leather jackets or whatever to the older guys. You know what I mean? They send them to the business owners. And then for something that's on the streets, they'll send somebody like me. And maybe that was just because I had experience in the streets. I grew up around, later on around certain drug dealers and gangs and stuff like that. So they knew that I was comfortable in it. So they were just basically giving me the bitch work, and I took a percentage off of it, and it was good money. It was money that I'd never seen before.
How much did you make?
Yeah, the first month I made about $8,000, which is the most money I've ever made up until then I had made in my life, and then I was regularly making between 10 and 15, I'd say probably, and then in that year and a half, I think I did about 150, 160K
Really?
just from the collections.
Did you save it? Save the money?
I saved a little bit. So I've said this before, like I was always bad with spending money. But I saved let's say I don't know, 25, 30 grand out of it. The rest I was just having a good time because it was the first time that I'd ever had money in my life. So yeah, I was going to the club and doing all the stupid shit.
So you did this for like 18 months.
Yeah, more or less, yeah. Yeah, about a year and a half.
And then what happened when you finished? Why did you finish it if you're making such good money?
Yeah, I finished. Okay, so a couple of things had happened in that year and a half, and I realized that I was starting to get eyes on me. Even though I was collecting for guys that were usually out of the city, I was collecting within the city. So people would hear about that. You know what I mean? Maybe some junkie goes and tells some other Italian guy, it's like, oh, do you know Germano? It's like, oh, he just, he came and saw me the other day or whatever it was. So I was starting to get attention, and I didn't want that. On top of that, I had a guy that was doing the same thing that I was doing for a Winnipeg group. Um, they're an Aboriginal group. They're a pretty big group out here, but he was basically doing collections for them. And he was basically letting me know, like, hey, man, like these guys, like some of the Italians in the city, they see what they're doing, what you're doing a good job. They're starting to ask questions about you. So I'm already a little paranoid and a little bit uncomfortable with that. And then there was a point where the people that I was working for asked me to start carrying a piece, and I told them I didn't want to. I basically said, when I got into this, it was because it was easy. I was a mediator. I wasn't an enforcer. I'm not going to carry a gun because I might have to use it one day, and I'm not going to go into jail for $10,000. You know what I mean? Like that's just ridiculous. So, yeah, after all this stuff started happening, I eventually made the decision to kind of walk away before before they approached me, because I know I was already quite well aware that when you're asked to do something by these guys, you can't really say no. You know what I mean? So I said, before they ask me, I'm going to leave. And I basically just told the guy that I was connected to, two of them in Ontario and Quebec, that, I wasn't going to do this anymore, and I was going to take a break, and I was going to start traveling. And we left on good terms. I stayed friends with one of them and spoke with him for several years after, but I was done after that.
So what would happen to you if you said no?
Well, yeah, it depends. It depends on the situation that I'm in. So if I'm a made guy, if I'm an actual figure, I can't say no. So it's what would happen. I'd probably catch a beating the first time, and then afterwards, who knows? You know what I mean? You can't really say no to these guys. So, I think, like I said, in the position I was in, I was not a figure. I was an associate, and I was a friend. So I was lucky. I didn't have to deal with that. I didn't have to find out.
So do you think that they would have asked you to become a made man?
I don't know about that, but they were gonna start asking. I know that they were about to start asking me to start putting in work. So usually that means hurting somebody. And I was also told that somebody might ask me to move some packs. So, drugs, right? Which I had no interest in again. So it's like, I looked at it as like, hey, I'm going to have to carry a gun. I'm probably going to have to sell drugs, and I'm going to have to hurt people. And I didn't want to go that far with it. It wasn't worth it to me.
And if you said no, you might catch a beating.
I would, if I was in, I would definitely catch a beating. As far as I'm told, or as far as I know, that's what happens. You don't just, especially if you're in a family or a clan or whatever it is, like they're not just going to go and kill you, but there's going to be some consequences for saying no. Like you don't do that. You know what I mean?
So it got on top a little bit, and hence you made a swift exit to pastures new, like several pastures new.
Exactly, yeah. And I had no idea what I was going to do afterwards, by the way. Like, I was doing some small scams at that time, like, that were giving me, like, maybe a couple grand a month. I was even doing some loans, you know what I mean? Like, small loans, like 5 grand here, 10 grand here. But I'd charge, like, a lot, like 20% a week, right? So if someone's borrowing, 5 grand off of me, they're paying me like $1,000 every week just on the interest, right? So I did little things like that. But I was not like getting rich off of anything. I just knew that I wanted to travel. I had like whatever I said, 25, 30 grand saved. And then I just decided to leave and started traveling.
So did the Canadian mob open the doors for you for the Italian mob?
In a way, yes. Yeah. And like I don't think it was like I want to be careful how I set this up because it's a delicate subject, obviously. I think that, yeah, when I was, I spent that first year traveling. I went to places in Latin America, and then eventually a year later, I would go to Italy, and I basically reconnected with my friend in Quebec, and the guy in Ontario, and I said, hey, I'm going to Italy. And they said, who are you staying with? Who do you know out there? All these questions, and then I was basically sent to this other guy. But I'll tell you the truth. When I first went over there, again, I didn't know who I was meeting. I don't think that like it was a job interview or anything like that. I wasn't going there to start a new crime or anything like that. It just naturally flowed. This is one thing that people really don't realize in this life is that doors open a lot once you're in it at all. It's hard to really explain that, but you could be a guy that comes off the street and you get comfortable with the right people and you go from working in a 9 to 5 job to being involved in 10, 15 different organized crimes and meeting people from groups all over the world. Like, a lot of this is based on character. I like to think that I have good character. I've done bad things in my life, but I think that my character is overall good. And there's something attractive about that to even organized crime groups, just the way that I carry myself. So when I went over to Italy the first time and I got introduced to this guy that was a Calabrian that basically headed a family out in Milan, I had no idea, again, who I was really meeting. I knew I was meeting an Italian guy, a Calabrian in Milan. That's it. I didn't know he was a boss. I didn't know he's connected. I didn't know we would become friends. None of that kind of stuff. So it just happened naturally. I go and meet this guy and things just kind of opened up for me from that.
So how did they open up for you?
Yeah, so we just the first day that I met him, and I feel like a broken record repeating this, but the first day that I met him, it was like an interrogation. You know what I mean? It was just every question you could think of under the sun, like, who are you? Where does your family come from? How do you know this guy back in Canada? What are you doing for him out there? Just like every single question that you could think of. And I knew as soon as I met this guy that he was someone serious. He just had this aura about him, this energy that was just like, you know, it's different. I'll just say it like that. I've met gangsters from like, I don't know, 50 different countries. And when you meet someone from the US or Canada, we'll just stick with Italians for now. You meet like an Italian Canadian or an Italian American and like crime figure, and then you go meet one in Italy, you notice the difference right away. So these guys are way more intense. Not to say that the guys in North America are not serious, they are, and some of them are like, some solid fucking guys. But meeting someone in Italy, you realize how small you are, So I remember feeling that with him, and something told me just answer truthfully. Like, answer everything that he's asking you, answer truthfully. Because even if I'm trying to protect the other guy or whatever, he's going to see through all of that. So, he'd ask me a question, I'd answer. And that went on for a while. And, eventually we became comfortable. By the end of that conversation, we probably talked about 3 or 4 hours. The first hour is like an interrogation, but after that, we talk about everything from football. He was breaking my balls a bit because he's a Milan fan. He's from Milan, right? And I'm a Juventus fan. So, once he started joking with me a little bit, I felt like way more at ease. And yeah, he just kind of asked like what I was into, and I told him the truth. I said, doing little debt collections. I was doing some stuff with empty envelopes. I was, loan sharking a bit, whatever it was, but nothing serious. And he just asked why I'm out in Italy and told me some places to go to, and yeah, we just kind of kicked it, And the next time that I saw him, which was was the same trip because I went there for a month, but we met in a different city in Italy. That when he opened up a lot more, and I started to realize like this guy's intense, and he was very like particular about like he'd never been on a plane in his life. This is what he tells me, anyways. Never been on a plane in his life. He had to switch locations a lot. He was constantly going to other countries like Germany. Where else? Germany, France, Switzerland. Um, yeah, he was just a mysterious guy. He opened up to me and everything, but it was clear that he was somebody, and eventually I would find out later on that he was like the head of a family in Milan, and the way that my crime life progressed with him was he just kind of broke down everything for me. So like I already knew about basically how Canada worked and the US and stuff like that. But this guy was like my first real schooling on how international crime worked. He talked to me about money laundering. He talked to me about cocaine, about what it costed, where it came from, where it went to, all that kind of stuff. And then he also taught me the hierarchy of the Calabrian group, and how it was different from the other groups, and how they dominated the cocaine market in Europe, and how they had relationships overseas, like familial ties with Colombian cartels or Brazilian cartels, all kinds of stuff. So he was, like I said, he was like a mentor for me in the criminal world, and he eventually introduces me to a man where I get into my next racket with.
So if we can just stay on the Italian Mafia, organised crime for
Sure.
a little bit, and then we'll obviously jump into all your other crazy expedites. So are you saying in your book that you took a blood oath with these guys? Really?
I took a blood oath. Okay, so I took like how can I explain this? I made a pact with his son. So what that was, a lot of people get confused with that. In Calabrian culture, blood oaths are a big thing. So there's obviously one to join the organization, but there's also other ones that happen in quiet spaces between one man and another man. So with me and the son, it was basically an agreement that I took very seriously, even to this day, that if I was going to join a family, I would join his, and I would come to Milan. And that was a pact that him and I made. So it wasn't like a ceremony or anything. It was just very vague. Me and him were sitting there. He told me like, I want you here with us. I want you here in Milan. We can make you rich. My dad loves you. I love you. A lot of the other guys, they're starting to see that, like, you can do a lot of things for the family, da 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 da. And then I remember telling him, all the reasons why I couldn't. Like I'm, Italian and Irish. Like I use that as an excuse, because especially with the Calabrians, it's really blood more than anything. So you got to be like born into it, so to speak. You're born into it or you let blood flow, right? It's one or the other.
Right.
So, I was saying, I'm like a quarter Calabrian. It's always something that like meant something to me and something I'm proud of. But in that world, it's like nothing. You know what I mean? So I told him like, man, I can't join. He's like, my father is the boss. Like, who's gonna say that you can't? Like, you should join us. And I'm not gonna lie, there's like a small part of me was tempted by it just because not so much the money, but just for my own character, like just being close to roots, living in Italy, having a house there, having money, getting in with this family. Family's always been big for me because I didn't have a lot over the years, especially when I got into crime. I didn't talk to anybody anymore. So yeah, there's a lot of things that looked attractive about it to me, but I ended up, just basically saying like I can't do it. But he said, promise me if you ever do that you're gonna join us because guys like you never stay away from this life forever. So when you're ready, join us. And I said, okay. He's like, do you promise? I said, I promise. And then, yeah, we had this little thing, cut ourselves. Well, he cut a little cut in my hand. We shook hands. We kissed, signs of the chiefs, and I made my pact with him. And I never went against it.
How did you get close to them? So we've spoken about your initial meeting with the mafia boss.
Yeah.
So what was it about you that they warmed to? They took you into their bosom, so to speak.
I think it's just because I'm a normal guy, but I'm also a bit shady. So you got to understand that in that world, in all of organized crime, people like mentally stable people that don't flinch. When you're talking about whatever bodies, drugs, whatever else, and someone that they just like as a person. It's not always familial ties. It's not always who you know. Sometimes it's who you meet, and that was my life. Like really, I only had 7 or 8 years involved in organized crime, and the reason why I met people from all types of different groups from every single continent was just because of my personality. It helped that I had some connections here, or it might help that I had some knowledge about this racket or whatever. But I mean, on a real note, most of the connections I made were just human. They were just human connections.
But you put in work for them, though, didn't you? You were a kind of mediator to a few conflicts,
Yeah,
according to your book.
yeah, there was a couple of times. So like I did organize a couple of deals between a couple of other groups that were in the UK, like Nigerian group and Albanians, and even some other groups like Kurdish and just some big groups in the UK. I brokered some deals, didn't make any money off of it, didn't because like by this point in time, I was 100% not doing anything with drugs, and the family had actually given me the opportunity many times to get involved, and I would have made a lot. I was already making hundreds of thousands a year. I think that if I went with them, I would have been making millions of dollars a year. But I was firm on that, and to be honest, a couple of the guys liked me because of that, because I didn't want anything to do with drugs. But I did broker a few deals, and then on top of that, through the Nigerians. Basically, there was a beef within the family. It wasn't touching Milan directly, but I guess from my knowledge, it was the cousin of the father who still lived in Calabria. They have like a territory out there in Calabria, and there was another clan or family that was starting to move in to their like they would do little things like they would set up like a dope spot like a block outside of the not a block because it's not actually city blocks out there, it's all very village type shit, but they would like set up things like just at the outskirts to kind of provoke them. But the thing is, like, to do anything with these clans, you need permission, and you get permission from the head. And if you don't get that permission, you can't do anything, or there's consequences towards you. So that could mean selling drugs in someone's territory, or it could mean settling a beef with someone from a rival clan. You're not allowed to do any of that without permission. Just like with La Cosa Nostra and the board of directors in the U.S., it's very much a real thing in Calabria and Sicily and Naples with the Camorra as well.
One thing I found really interesting was, so one Italian clan, had an issue with another Italian clan.
Yeah, both Calabrians.
And then you got the Nigerians involved in that to talk to one of the clans to get the Nigerians to talk to one of the clans.
So they didn't talk to them. They didn't talk to them.
All right, well,
but yeah.
Okay, maybe a bit harder than talk to them. But my question was,
sure.
So you're telling me that the Italian organized crime groups are frightened of the Nigerians in Italy?
Oh yeah. Okay, so
really?
Actually, I have to be careful with how I say this here, but it's not the Nigerians. It's not because they're Nigerian. It's because this family that lives in a village next to another family that lives in a village that never see fucking black people, okay, where they are. They see people come in and start, I can't say everything that these guys were doing, but they were starting fires. They were leaving mantras behind. They were letting their presence be known. You know, it was just four big gangster Nigerian guys. And we're not talking about like broke guys. We're talking about, you know, guys with some money and stuff like that. So to see guys like that moving around over there, and, you know, maybe that when they went to have a cafe, they had a little conversation with somebody and, oh, you're friends with these guys over there. You know what I mean? It's kind of like you're using intimidation without actually being intimidating. You know, so there's a whole psychology, especially with the villages. It's real old school stuff. So would those Italians be scared to take on those four guys? Absolutely not. But what it did tell them is, okay, these guys over there, they're connected internationally. They're not just here. Because some of these guys, it's like small village mentality. So the minute that they see, okay, these guys are coming from over here and they're connected in London and all this other stuff, then the guys are starting to think, okay, because keep in mind, this family, this rival clan, already knew that the cousin of this guy in Milan was somebody. So let's say they send somebody from Milan down there, that guy's going to stop right away. But the problem with that is now you're going against the system. You're doing something without permission. Now, a couple of Nigerians go there, let that family know, we know what the fuck you're doing. Stop. Stay the fuck out, stay the fuck out of here. But they do it through the Nigerians. These guys don't have to deal with any problems. We didn't do nothing. We don't know those guys. Prove it. You know what I mean? So that's the real psychology behind it. Now, obviously, these Calabrian, this other group, they're strong as well. They have connections as well. Germany, Milan, wherever else. But they realized all of a sudden, okay, this guy's not just laying over anymore. He's not just going to sit there and get fucked. He's actually going to make some moves, and we can't do this shit anymore. And then eventually what ends up happening, because of, a couple of places got bombed, a couple fires were started, some mantras were left, like an old school Calabrian, a message was left to, they all speak in code out there. So it's basically like, don't step where you don't lay type thing. And what ends up happening is these families end up working together, oddly enough. So those guys set up a meeting shortly after with the clan that's connected to Milan, and they basically say, we want peace. They apologize or whatever it was. I wasn't there. I don't know exactly what was said, but I do know that they ended up brokering a deal where they were going to be, exchanging merchandise and whatever else.
What's the difference between the Italian crime families in Italy compared to the Italian crime families in Canada?
Oh, there's so much. So obviously the tradition, the roots, speaking the language, having the international connections, which Italians do. and North Americans, most of them do not. Like even to the highest level, they might have some connections in Dominican Republic or with a Mexican cartel or whatever else it is, but they are nowhere near as connected as Italians out there. So that's first of all. Second of all is the difference in money. So even though these groups in North America, Canada, and the US can make millions, tens of millions, hundreds of millions of dollars, maybe. I don't know about nowadays, but let's say they can, hundreds of millions a year. You're looking at international groups coming from these regions in southern Italy that are doing like 60 to 70 to $100 billion or euros a year. So the amount of money that they make is the biggest. Like we're so stupid in North America sometimes. Like we think that we're so rich and powerful, and it's like you don't understand that these crime groups over there, they could go, take a piss and make as much money as you make in a year in a day. It's fucking wild over there.
And I suppose come that comes with corruption of public officials and police, and I guess that's more prominent in Italy than Canada.
100%, 100, and not just Italy. I mean, all over the world. That's not to say that corruption doesn't exist in the Commonwealth, right? Like we all know that corruption is available everywhere, but yeah, it's a different breed over there. You might have, like, especially in a place like Calabria, you might have a cousin that's in the police force. You might have somebody on the inside that could tell you something. You might have a brother that's a lawyer. You might have. It's so much easier to be corrupted out there, and it's so much more violent as well. Like even though Canada's getting a reputation now to be known to be pretty violent with the organized crime groups, it's nowhere compared to Italy. Life is cheap in that part of the world.
So my understanding of it is the Italian crime groups are willing and able to attack law enforcement, government officials, like big wigs in the country. Whereas the American mafia that's kind of not allowed.
Yeah, not
so
anymore.
What's it like in Canada?
Not anymore. Yeah, Canada's the same as well. You do not hear about like public officials being murdered or even extorted or anything like that. Canada, especially, like they are a little bit more quiet. You know what I mean when it comes to that. So like all this war that you're seeing in Quebec, like that's loud. Everyone's hearing about it. Everybody knows about it. But in the way that these guys run their day-to-day lives, they're very quiet, and they don't want any attention from law enforcement or anything else like that. They'd rather have politicians and police and lawyers going after street gangs and concentrating on terrorism or whatever else than going after them, right?
Yeah, right. So how long did you spend in Italy with these guys?
So it was a period of about, let's say, like 3 to 4 years. Yeah, I'd go to Italy about 4 times a year. I typically see somebody from the family on every trip. Sometimes in Italy, sometimes in other places. Like I said, the old man didn't travel at all. Like he did, but only by car. He would never go on a plane. But I met the son in a couple of different places. I met somebody that I ended up money laundering with through that family. We used to meet in Sweden and other countries to talk about stuff. So.
Right. Did you like Italy as a country?
Oh yeah, I love it. Like Italy to me is, I mean, I think every Italian is like this deep down. It's just like it's the motherland. It's roots. You go there and you feel alive. Like whether you're sitting in a piazza and having an espresso or you're watching a football game or whatever, you just feel at home. And I felt like that in Italy. If it wasn't so difficult to move there, and if I wasn't connected to so much shit, I would have definitely lived there. Because like I gave up on Europe very early on. Like when I decided that I was going to make a move, I was going to live somewhere else in the world. Europe was not ideal for me.
Why is that?
For many reasons. First of all, the economy was fucked. Second of all, it's not easy. The permanent residence process is a little bit longer. There's more of a microscope. They definitely look at your background and I didn't want to have that kind of thing on me. And even though it is corrupt, it's not as corrupt as some of the other places I was looking at.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah,
So let's touch on your other exploits. So Colombia
Colombia.
is you spend quite a bit of your book talking about the crazy goings on in Colombia.
Yeah,
Did you? Did probably my favourite part of your book actually. I'll paint the picture. My side. I was in a subway reading your book, and the particular story was on you going into. I think you'd finished I think it was COVID time.
yeah,
And all the bars. Obviously, you speak in a sec. I won't steal your thunder, but
yeah.
you went into all the bars shut. You were going to go home, but you didn't really want to. Somehow or another, you ended up in this crazy mad ass place, and I was just like, I thought I was in there when I was reading it, and I was very disappointed to look up and see
You weren't there.
Subway and Coke and all that stuff, and I wasn't there, mate. I was gutted. But yeah, can you explain that? I think that was, for me, that was the best part of the book.
Yeah. So, yeah, before we get to right there, what I will say is like there's a couple of different countries. Uh, I visited over 30 countries in that 7 year period, but there's probably like 4 or 5 that like meant more to me than the others for different reasons. Italy, obviously, because of the roots, because of me connecting with that family, because of the time I spent out there. That's obvious, right? But Colombia is probably right up there with Italy because of my experiences out there. I think Colombia specifically, I spent more time in that country than anywhere else in the world. Over a period of 2 years, I spent over 12 months over a period of 2 years there because I remember at one point when I went to re-enter, I had to pay extra because I had gone over the 6 month mark 1 year. So I know that I was actually there for a long period of time. So basically, what happens is I'm in Ecuador. A buddy reaches out to me, tells me, "Do you want to come to Colombia? I need to get out of Winnipeg. I'm going crazy with the pandemic. We got a friend that's going over there, this Colombian national, this girl that's a friend of ours. She'll meet us out there." I say, "Yeah, why not?" So I make plans. I end up going to Bogota and Medellin first, and Medellin is where I go on a Pablo Escobar tour, and I meet with his sister, and I basically get the whole Escobar experience, which was phenomenal.
We've got to zoom in on that one.
Yeah,
So, can you explain, like, from kind of start to finish about being around Pablo Escobar's family?
yeah. So it's there's a mystique to it, definitely. So basically, what happened was I went on a tour, a Pablo Escobar tour. So they basically take you to where he was killed, like where he spent his last hours. They take you to his prison that he had built for himself. They take you to all these like really well known places. His tombstone. I went to where his headstone was and stuff like that. Incredible experience. The guy that was with me, I don't know this for sure, and I don't want to say anything that might get him in trouble, but I got like real cartel vibes off of him. So in my opinion, what I think is that whoever organized all this, there was definitely obviously the family did. As far as I know, his brother kind of does the whole thing, but there's definitely guys that they send in to do the tour that I feel like are, these guys are a little bit shady in a good way. Really nice guy, but guy looked like a little thug. Um, so he takes me on all this stuff, and then he asks me at the end. He's like, "Hey, man, like we're starting something here. We're basically setting up this thing where you can meet the family. Like, would you be interested in something like that?" And I was like, "Of course I would." Like, what kind of question is that, right? So I had always been just like everybody else, I think, in the world, fascinated by narco culture, and specifically with the Escobar and their regime and everything like that. So I end up, meeting with his sister, lovely woman. What I will say is uh, a little bit diluted in the sense that, not to be disrespectful, but in her mind, Pablo was just a saint and he was just an angel, and he didn't do all the things that the media and the government said that he did. So on that part of it, I loved her. I was completely respectful. She was completely respectful. She answered a lot of my questions. I got to look at a family photo album. She showed me souvenirs that she had of him. I remember at one point I asked her, actually, I was like, what's your favorite like piece of memorabilia from that time? And she's like, oh, that glass over there. And I looked at the table, and I was like, what is that? What's in there? And she's like, that's his hair. I was like, what? And I looked, and it was just like basically this little like plastic this container, and it had a bunch of hair. And she told me that um she had gone to visit him in prison, the prison that he had built for him, and I guess he was about to get out or something, and he hadn't shaved in so long. So she shaved his beard and she kept his hair. And that was like her most precious thing, I guess, because it was something, it was part of him technically. But yeah, we sat there for, it must have been like 3 hours, and I got a real inside look at who he was as a person. I asked, did he have the right people around him? I asked questions like that. Was this person from the show real or whatever? And like one of the guys that we talked about, have you seen Narcos?
No, I haven't watched it.
You haven't watched it? Okay. Well, if you ever
No.
do, which you should, because everybody should, not because it's like this real, legitimate outlook on the life, but just because it was a great show. But one of the guys that's part of his crew is this guy named Blackie, and she was telling me, that was the friend that I trusted the most. I said, "What do you think his downfall was?" She said, "I think when he got involved in politics, like that was the end for him. Like we had all the power in the country, and then the minute that you go up to politics and you start, messing around with that, you get a target painted on you, and that was the beginning of the end." So great experience though, being out there.
How did you find this tour? Was it on the internet? Or...
Yeah, you can find it on the internet now. At the time, the family one, at the time, I couldn't find that online. Now it is. Now I think there's even pictures you can see online of her with people. She has basically this like how there's this wallpaper behind me here. She basically has this big blown up picture of her with Pablo, and then another woman on the side of Pablo. And at the end of the tour, you can take a picture in front of it, which I did. I'll send that to you later. But yeah, it's an amazing experience. You can go online, just type in Pablo Escobar tour, and I'm pretty sure it'll be the first one that comes up on TripAdvisor or wherever.
Did you leave a review?
No, I didn't leave it. No, because remember at the time the family thing wasn't set up yet. So yeah, but no, it was an amazing experience.
I bet. I'd love to see the photo. So how long was the tour?
Yeah, so the whole tour was probably 5 or 6 hours, man. It was great. I did I'd say we did about 2-3 hours visiting those spots that I told you about, like the apartment where he was killed, and the headstone and everything. And then we spent a couple hours with her. So it was a good lengthy tour. It was worth it.
That must have been a surreal experience.
Oh yeah, amazing. Yeah, it was just, you're in the presence of greatness. You know what I mean? Like, and regardless of how you feel about it personally, the guy did good things, the guy did bad things, but it's greatness. The things that he accomplished, even today in the modern world, nobody accomplished what he did, in my opinion. So yeah, it was wonderful to be around someone that saw it growing up. She used to tell me how she used to count money for him. She'd go into a house and every single room would be just stacked up with American $100 bills. It's crazy.
And she doesn't think he was into that kind of life.
Well, no. So so like that specific moment that I told you about, that's how she told me she found out that he was doing cocaine. She didn't know at the time, because you got to keep in mind the Escobars were already famous for smuggling, so like cigarettes and TVs and everything like that. So they had already had a lot of money and their roots and everything like that. But the first time she realized that he was who everyone was saying he was this time that he asked her to count, like they said, I need all this counted in 3 hours or something, and he brought her and like 3 other family members, and it was a house full of money, and she said this is going to take 3 weeks. So but yeah, she just didn't want to, I didn't push too much. And the guy actually told me before we even went in, he's like, man, don't say anything bad about like what he did and stuff like that. I was like, why? It's like, she doesn't kind of accept that he was who he was. But I get it. I mean, that's her brother, and she wanted to think of him in the best way possible, and I think she also doesn't want the bad to overcloud all the good that he did, because he actually did a lot of great things for his country and his community as well, and that kind of gets forgotten about once you start talking about the bad stuff that he did.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
I take it it wasn't expensive, the tour.
No, I think at the time I paid probably like 130, $140. It was, yeah, it was good. Yeah.
Like Canadian dollars or US dollars.
Yeah, Canadian. So you'll probably pay. I don't know how much it is now. It might be more expensive now. You know what I mean? Because it's probably more in demand. But yeah, you'll probably pay between 100 and 150 USD. I'm guessing.
Really.
Yeah.
It's quite commercialized now by the sound of it.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Yeah.
Cool. So there you go. Anyone who's listening and you fancy going to Colombia for a Pablo Escobar tour, then, get online and do some Googling.
Definitely, it's
you might
worth
get
it.
a decent price.
It's
as
worth
well.
it. Yeah.
Brilliant. So after your Pablo Escobar tour, then where did you go? What stuff did you get into?
Yeah. So after that, like I had already planned to go to Cartagena, which is where I was going to be meeting my friend from Winnipeg, along with the Colombian national who also lives in Winnipeg, and a couple of other friends later on. So I finish up in Bogota, Medellin, and then I head over to Cartagena. I've got a couple of days to myself over there, and it was like I'd been to places like it. Like you could say, like it's like a condensed, smaller, more intimate version of like Cancun. It's just this beautiful coastal town in Colombia. The water's gorgeous. The climate's like, Celsius. I don't know what it would be. And, you use Celsius too. Never mind. Like 30,
Yeah.
32 degrees every single day, all year. Just paradise, man. Got a really nice little penthouse there. Things are so cheap in Colombia. What I paid for this penthouse would be triple or quadruple the price of what it is over there. Spent 2 days there, just kind of relaxed. Checked out some local spots, and then finally 2 or 3 days in, my friend, Cuban guy from Winnipeg, arrives. We go out. We have a good time. We meet up with the Colombian national. Her brother joins us as well. He still lives in Colombia. He lives in Cali. And then I think another group from Bogota joined us as well, this couple. And we went to this little hookah lounge. We partied. We had a really good time. Everybody's dancing, drinking, letting loose. And yeah, we go to leave at like 12 because I didn't know this, but like everything closes at 12 in Cartagena because of the pandemic at the time. And we're walking out and we see this guy, and he's like, "Hey, you guys want to come to a party?" And normally I would say no. I never went to after parties in foreign countries and stuff like that because you never know what can happen. But everyone's like, come on. Everyone's drunk. So I'm like, hey, you know what? Let's do this. So we get in these taxis, which are owned by, one of the organizations out there, and they basically tell us what to say. So like there's police checkpoints because you're not supposed to be out after 12. So they just say, hey, if you get stopped, say you're staying at this hotel, which was close to where we were going, and yeah, just kind of let us know the run of things. So we get to this place. We go inside. It looks like absolutely nothing from outside. It looks like a little storefront or something. I go in there. There's an older woman waiting for us. I think we paid a little bit to get in. It wasn't much. It was probably like the equivalent of like $10, $20 Canadian. We get patted down by some serious looking guys, and then we go in through this hallway. It has a red curtain, like a velvet curtain. Go through the curtain, walk down this hallway, go through another curtain, walk down these stairs, go through another curtain, walk down this hallway. The final curtain, it could be less or more than that. I was pretty drunk. But you get to the final red velvet curtain, open it up, and then all of a sudden it's like this nightclub outside without a roof, and there's like a pool in the middle. There's a catwalk with a stripper pole going up the middle, leather couches all around the pool. And I'm like, what the hell is this? Like, what, you know what I mean? Like, where are we right now? And it was completely dead too, because we got there at like 12:20 and they had basically just opened up, but I didn't know that. So I said to the guy, I was like, hey man, like the fuck kind of party is this? You know what I mean? Like, it's not what I expected. He's like, hey, listen, like we just opened. I was like, okay. And he's like, just give me a second. So he goes over to the wall. He hits this like this siren. Siren goes off, and he's like, take a look. And we look over, and just beyond the pool, they have I guess a set of stairs that leads up to like these like little apartments. And all of a sudden, just like 20, 30 girls just pour out, you know. And these girls are from everywhere. They're from Brazil, Colombia, like Latin America, Colombia, Venezuela, Mexico, all over the place. And just the hottest woman you've ever seen in your life, man. Like they're all nines and tens, you know what I mean? So I remember just like kind of chuckling, and I looked at the Colombian national, the girl, and she's like, you know, in Spanish, she's like, "Welcome to Colombia." And I was like, "Holy shit!" And she was cool with it because like she grew up when she was younger. She knows the life, so she didn't care at all. And yeah, these girls come out, and my buddies are just going nuts. They're like, "This is the best day of their life," right? We go and we sit poolside uh, in these leather chairs. One thing I got to say about this place too, and this is in general in Cartagena especially, Colombians are some of the most hospitable people in the world when it comes to like guest services, when it comes to friendliness, when it comes to just taking care of you. I think Colombians are actually the best in the world. Maybe Moroccans next, but Colombians and Moroccans, like in their country, there's no hospitality like I've experienced in those places. So we sit down. They give us two security guards, basically. One is actually the guy that was waiting out for us when we exited out of the hookah spot. So he basically, I guess he's a promoter slash security slash whatever. That's the way it works in those places. And then we had this other guy. I almost said his name. I can't say his name just in case. I don't want to get him in trouble. But he was basically the Colombian version of Arnold Schwarzenegger, man. This guy was fucking massive. And he was really tall for a Colombian, too. Colombians aren't very tall. He's like 6'3", just jacked, looked like he was roided out. And these guys would just basically like, you know, like stand like this with their arms, you know, crossed, and they would watch out for you. So, and every table of every couch, let's say there's 20 of them, they would have the same service. So it doesn't even matter how much you're spending. Like I hadn't even ordered anything yet, and they came to me and they said, "Look, we're here for the rest of the night. If you have any issues, you let us know. If the girls want to talk to you, we're gonna ask you if it's okay first." So it's like that's really good because in some of those places, the girls that work in these clubs or whatever, they're on you all the time. But in this place, the guys would check with you. Hey, do you like her? Can she come? And I like that too because we didn't know what we were getting into, and I'm not interested in that kind of stuff. So like, it's nice to watch and everything, but I don't want some girl like trying to get money out of me every 5 seconds. You know what I mean? So, we sit down, we pop a couple of bottles. Um, my friend, the Colombian girl, and my friend that visited from Winnipeg, the Cuban, they ended up going in the pool, which was hilarious. It was like 3:30 in the morning. We're completely wasted, and the girl that I was sitting with gave her the Colombian girl a swimming suit to go in, and then my buddy was so drunk he just went in his boxers. He just jumped in, and we had an amazing time. I sent my taxi driver in with a couple of girls because I didn't say this, but I liked our taxi driver and I trusted him. And when you trust someone in that kind of place, it's good to keep them close to you. So I said, bro, I'm gonna give you like $300-$400 USD. You're staying with us all night, and you leave when we want to leave. And I typically did that wherever I went to. Like if I found like a driver that I really liked, I would take very good care of them, and they would be driving me everywhere because I'm not in this huge gangster life, but I was still very paranoid at some points. I was just like about who to trust, and as much as I don't look like much to someone that's watching, when I'm in Colombia and you know I've got you know my bag and I've got a bunch a big stack of Colombian pesos and I've got tattoos on my hands and stuff like that, like you never know how people are going to perceive you, and that can be with law enforcement or with the cartels or whatever else. So I send this guy in with a couple of girls. They tell me later on that he didn't do the business, that he's married or whatever, but I respected him more for that. But that night kind of changes my life. So it starts that night where a girl gets sent over to me, and she was a typical Colombian prostitute, uh, big fake tits, fake ass, hair down to her ankles, like the ones you see out there. And not my type. I don't like that type at all. But one of my friends that was visiting was all over it. The girl that was with her, who I end up, having history with later on, um, was the complete opposite. She was like quiet, shy, nerdy, had glasses, wasn't showing too much skin, wasn't impressed with the alcohol, with the partying or anything. She just didn't fit in, and I really liked her. That's typically a woman that I would go towards. You know what I mean? Like in this place, this is all fun and everything like that, but like I'm not really gonna partake. My friends can, whatever. Me and this girl get to talking. I really like her. She's soft spoken. She had just arrived in that place, and it sounded like she was groomed. So basically, what happened was she had a friend that had came to Cartagena and started working in this place, and then started basically grooming her and saying, "Hey, I'm working at a club." She just tells her it's a club. We're making good money out here. It's like tourist dollars. At the time, this woman that would end up becoming my wife, spoiler alert, um, she was making, she said 50 USD a month. And that was really good in Venezuela. So 50 USD, but minimum wage was 5 something USD a month. So when I asked her what she was doing in that club, she's like, this girl told me that, this had tourist money, da da da. I didn't know that this is what it was, but by the time she got there, she had gone the illegal route. So she had gone through the jungle, she'd gone through the river on this little shitty boat, all this stuff. She's completely destroyed. She used to show me photos of her feet from the travel that she had done, right? 'Cause she didn't wear the right shoes. So she just got completely destroyed. So you think of a person that just leaves like a communist country, travels through the jungle and the river, and has left everything behind just to get to this place, is completely exhausted and just defeated, and then you offer them an opportunity to make money. And what it sounded like is the first couple of days she's just like serving drinks or whatever else, and then after a couple of days, then all of a sudden it's okay, well, you got to go with this guy, that's how you're going to make money. And she's kind of like, what the fuck? And you got to keep in mind she had 2 daughters that she had back home in Venezuela. So she'd gone through all of this, and she hated what she was in, but she was also so desperate not to go back to Venezuela with nothing that she did what she had to do. Like I said, luckily she was only there for a couple of weeks before we met, but we got along. She told me her story, and I really liked her. And I would spend the next several days going back and visiting her. It was kind of up and down, but I had decided after like the 3rd day or so, I wanted to get her out of there. And for me, it was not, I was not in love yet. I just felt responsible for this person. I thought that they were in a place that they shouldn't be, and I wanted to do something good for them. So I liked her, but it was more like, I need to get you out. I need to get you back in Venezuela with your family. I'm going to put some money in your bank account. I'm going to help you start a business out there, whatever we got to do, so that you don't have to come back to this place. And she didn't believe me at first. And like, a lot of lies are told in that places. Lies are told from the woman, but sometimes men lie as well. Oh, I don't have a wife, or I'm going to come back, baby, or whatever the fuck it is. So she didn't believe me, and I thought I had more time. We were supposed to be in Cartagena for a couple of weeks, and then I ended up getting an email from Air Canada telling me that we had to leave the country because they were shutting down all the flights. So I'm thinking I got another week and a half to figure this stuff out, and then all of a sudden I get this email. I'm like, okay, we have to go in like 2 days. And yeah, a lot of stuff went through my head at the time. I was thinking, I'm gonna have to extract this woman, or like whatever it was. I had some contacts down there by then. The guy that I was with was special forces in the Canadian military. He's like a sniper. And I had contacts with some police and some cartel guys and whatever else. So in my mind, I was like ready to go that far if it had to. I needed to get this woman out of there, and luckily it didn't have to go that way. I ended up going on a little bit of a boat cruise with one of the security guys, the same guy that was outside the lounge. We became friends. He was also Venezuelan, and he told me he basically told me that he didn't just tell me this. I asked. I was prying a little bit, but I asked about the girl. And I asked if it would be an issue if she left, and he said he didn't really know. That some of the girls can leave, some of them can't, but for the most part, I had to check in with the boss. So I asked, I pried a little bit, and I said, is this place ran by the cartel? And he's like, no, nothing like that. I was like, bro, like I need to know. Like you're not snitching here. I'm not fucking law. I'm not nothing like this. I need to know what I'm getting into. I don't want to offend anybody. I don't want to get into a fucking shootout in a club or something, or get murked and get thrown in the fucking Caribbean Sea. So, but he let me know that it did belong to an organization, and I knew this organization. I had heard of them, and they're very big in Colombia. So I had to be very careful with what I was doing. But a couple of days later, it's my final night, and 3 o'clock in the morning, I'm at that spot again, having an amazing time with the woman. By this time, I'm in love with her. After like 4 or 5 days, I'm just like, now I want her for me. Not I don't just want to take her out of there. But I basically I let her know that I'm gonna get you out of here. It's gonna take me a few days, but I'm gonna get you out of here. So, and I still give her the same option. Like, you don't have to come with me. Go home. Go to Venezuela. I'll set you up nice. I just want to make sure that you're okay. So that night, 3 o'clock in the morning, I'm drunk. I'm having a good time. The security guy comes up to me. He's like, "You want to talk to the boss?" I end up talking to the boss, even though it was not a good time for me. I'm drunk. It's 3 o'clock in the morning. I probably look belligerent. We have a conversation. They basically they give me permission at the end of it. I basically said, I know this woman's not making any money for you. I can see the way she is in the club. She sits in the corner. She doesn't want to talk to the guys. Like, she's not doing anything for you. This place is like a revolving door. I know you're going to have 2 new girls tomorrow. And, and he's asked what my intentions were. I said, I'm going to marry her, and the guys with him kind of laughed or whatever. And I was dead serious. I said, listen, man, I'm going to marry her. I'm going to take her to Canada, give her a better life. And the guy respected me. He said, you know what? You're right. There's certain people that belong here. She doesn't belong here. You have my permission. Go. So then I told her I leave, go back to Canada.
Do you have to pay?
Sorry?
Did you have to pay the guy?
No. And a lot of people asked that. And to be honest, I thought I was going to have to. I thought I was going to have to give this guy something. But he was really, listen, certain guys and certain organizations, or certain guys in certain organizations, they will charge you. And those women, sometimes they're like slaves. But this guy in particular was very open. Like, he was providing, this sounds ridiculous, but he was providing a safe place for these girls to work. And they could come freely and leave whenever they wanted to. And that was it. Like, if she decided to leave the next day, she could leave, So it was I think that's what allured a lot of the women to going down there, because they heard, like, okay, so to get specific with you, okay, when you go into the room with the girl over there, you're paying about 300,000 Colombian pesos, more or less $100. Okay, the girl keeps 250,000. That's like unheard of. So anytime you hear of pimping or sex trafficking or whatever that shit, whoever's organizing it, whoever is really the person that's in control, they're making all the money. And in this place, it was the opposite. They were trying to make their money off of the alcohol. They took a percentage from the girls, which was still wrong. It's still, like, I don't condone any of it, right? I told you I don't even like being in a place like that. But the girls really had an opportunity, if they wanted to make good money there. You know what I mean? Because $100 doesn't sound like much to us, but a girl that can go there, and if she's like open to it and she's active, you have sex with 3 guys, 4 guys a night, and you're making $400. Maybe the guy tips you, you're making $500, $600. You got to understand, a lot of the people that came to that place too, they're from really shitty parts of the world and shitty parts within those shitty parts. So someone coming from Venezuela that's used to making $50 is now making $200 a night. Forget about it. They're not going to leave.
Wow.
Yeah.
Your escapades with women could probably take up about 10 podcasts.
Definitely.
So just good stuff. So just a couple of questions on the lady that you married.
Sure.
The old romantic of you, when you married her, one of the first things you did, or a week or two after, was you took her into, there's several things wrong with this, but you took her into a Hooters bar, yeah, to watch the Euro Championship finals, didn't you?
Yeah, but not like the way you're saying it, man. So this is what happened. So this was actually probably about like 3 months later that I visited my brother in Cancun, and there was nowhere to watch soccer like at that time of the day. So we went to a Hooters. Yeah. I don't know.
Did she have a good time there?
Yeah, like yeah, no, that makes me look so bad now. No, she was actually, she wanted to. I'm not gonna lie, she loved American chains. So like Hooters, or like what else? Like Burger King, like anything American she loved. So Hooters was like, she loved it. She asked me to buy her a t-shirt and a pair of shorts from there. I said, "Really?" She said, "Okay." That's so random. I can't believe you asked me that. No, I feel so bad. I wasn't like going to take her to a Hooters bar. That's terrible. But that was the place that was showing the World Cup game.
Yeah, of course, Germano, of course.
Yeah.
But not only did you take her to a Hooters bar,
here we go.
you also cheered on Italy against England.
Well, of course, yeah.
So that's
I know what you're saying here, buddy.
it was a good match.
Next question.
Nail biting stuff. So I'm not, like I say, I'm not going to. You talk extensively about her and other ladies in your book. So obviously the listeners can read the book and delve into that there. Are you still in contact with this lady now?
The last time that we talked was probably January or February. I tried. So, spoiler alert. We ended things in November, December of 2022. But I tried a lot last year to put it back together. I decided to leave the relationship. You can read about the reasons a little bit in the book, but it just didn't work out. Amazing woman, beautiful. Can't say anything bad about her. Really respect her. But it didn't work out. I tried last year because in the back of my mind, like, I take marriage seriously. She was the love of my life up until then. And we were only together a year and a half, 2 years, but we went through 20 years of experiences within that period of time. Like, we traveled to all these countries together. We're dealing with coyotes. We're dealing with corrupt governments. We're dealing with getting married, all this crazy stuff, right? So, but yeah, we haven't talked since then. I'm actually going to try, and we'll see if it works out. But later this year, I'm going to try and get her to be a part of the documentary that I'm doing, to basically say her side of the story and how we met and everything like that. She's not on social media. She's very quiet. She doesn't like the fact of how we met and stuff like that, because she's a woman that respects herself, honestly, and she's very ashamed of that small period of time in her life. But I'm really trying to get her on the documentary to tell her side and to give kind of like a character profile of who I am with someone that I'm in love with, right? But our relationship is over, the marriage is over, we're separated, and I'm seeing someone else recently, and I think that that's in the past for me now.
A nice Canadian girl.
No, she's Puerto Rican, and she's from Florida. But yeah, it's always.
Is there no nice ladies in Canada?
You know what? Listen. My personal preference is Latinas, man, and specifically like Latinas that come from their countries, right? North American women, they're not for me, but they're great. I'm not saying anything bad. I don't want to take any hits here, but yeah, my thing is with Latin culture, Latin women. Yeah.
Thanks for watching, guys. Part 2 will be in a separate video.